Hey, everybody. Before we begin the show, I wanted to give a shout out to our friends at POWERPOOL. POWERPOOL is a mining pool and is one of the most profitable for miners. So if you have one miner at home or a fleet of miners at scale, point your workers to POWERPOOL to enjoy the best payouts. POWERPOOL supports a number of algorithms, SHA-256 for Bitcoin, X11 for Dash, and others. And of course, we're focused and we care about the most, S-CRYPT for Litecoin, Dogecoin, and now Bell's Coin, merge mining. Pointing your workers to POWERPOOL is easy with its simple user interface, and the platform also has all the reporting available that your operation needs. Typically, POWERPOOL extends a low 1% pool fee. However, if you register with the 84 million link in the show notes, you will lock in a sub 1% pool fee, which is excellent. Cheers, happy mining. Hello and welcome to the 84 Million podcast. Today we're on episode number 41 with Yago from the BitcoinOS project. And let me just give him an introduction here. Edan Yago, co-founder and CEO of BitcoinOS, a revolutionary smart contract platform for Bitcoin, leveraging ZK proofs to embed computations directly onto the Bitcoin chain through transactions. Yago is also responsible for the Soveryn DeFi app for Bitcoin. He's currently partnering with and helping pioneer the Litecoin Virtual Machine, or LitVM, which, of course, we want to discuss BitcoinOS and LitVM today on the show. Follow Yago on X at Edan Yago. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. A pleasure to be here.
It's great seeing you. I saw you at the Litecoin Summit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what is a Bitcoin maximalist doing on a Litecoin podcast and at a Litecoin Summit?
Yeah, well, I would say I think I got two kinds of answer to that. The first is I've always believed I've always been a Bitcoin maximalist because I've always believed that what we're building is a network, right? Bitcoin is a money that has network effects. Liquidity has a network effect. Ecosystems have network effects. But what's most obvious is that networks have network effects, and Bitcoin is a network. Any crypto system is a crypto network. And so I've always believed that Bitcoin is by far the most likely to end up in a winner takes most situation. We've seen this again and again. It's basically a law of nature that when you have an industry or a system which is driven by network effects, you end up with everything consolidating around one network. And so I wasn't a Bitcoin maximist from an ideological perspective. I was a Bitcoin maximist from a practical perspective. We need to make sure that the network that is going to win is going to be able to do all of the things that we needed to do, that we wanted to do, and will allow us to create the kind of world we want ourselves, our children, our grandchildren to live in. The second reason, sort of why now, why haven't I been on Litecoin podcasts before, is because I think it's become obvious in a way that Bitcoin has won. And now the question is, what are we going to do about it? What is Litecoin going to do about it? What is Cardano going to do about it? What is Ethereum going to do about it? And my view is that it's time to put aside the tribalism. It's time to put aside sort of the fragmentation. And we can all start utilizing Bitcoin for what it really is, which is this public good where other systems can integrate with Bitcoin for the benefit of those systems. But equally as important, maybe even more important, for the good of Bitcoin, Bitcoiners, and the world.
It's a good statement, and I like the idea of collaboration. You know, I introduced you sort of tongue in cheek. You actually introduced yourself as such at the Litecoin Summit, and I'll link that in the show notes. But we've had a few maximalists on the show. We've had Vlad Costea, we've had Dennis Porter on the show. Our last episode was with Paul Storch. So we've had a few Bitcoiners here, and I think historically Bitcoiners and Litecoiners work together. That seemed to have been eclipsed for a little while, but I feel like we're going back to that, which is extremely good. Even the Bitcoin handle I noticed just on Sunday actually did a shout out to the Litecoin account, which was pretty cool to see with kind of a meme kind of a relaunch of the old Vegeta or Goku meme. It was just two robots walking down. But either way, I think this is good. I think, as you said at the summit, Litecoin's been responsible for a lot to make Bitcoin what it is, whether it was, SegWit or testing Lightning, and atomic swaps. And then, of course, we were able to take Taproot and just general code from Bitcoin. So it goes both ways. And we have Litecoin in its current form because of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is also a product of benefiting from Litecoin, some of the risks that Litecoin took over the years. So beautiful. So maybe we do want to talk about LitVM, the Litecoin Virtual Machine. But maybe before we do, tell us about what you're doing with BitcoinOS. This has been operating at least a year, maybe two now. And I'm seeing that's the ground floor of the scaffolding before we even had LitVM.
Well, Bitcoin, I think, obviously to everyone, has very, very significant limitations, right? It's got scaling limitations, it's got privacy limitations, it's got programmability limitations. And I've been working now on Bitcoin for 14 years, and my sense has always been that what we need to do is build into Bitcoin a greater degree of flexibility, which will allow for more decentralization, allow for building a native economy around Bitcoin, and allow Bitcoin to scale. And I was a big supporter. You had Paul on your show apparently recently. I was a big supporter for many years of drive chains, because drive chains is, I thought, the best path to allowing multiple different systems to be built around Bitcoin and integrate directly into Bitcoin, use BTC, the asset, but also provide effectively the Bitcoin ecosystem, the Bitcoin network, with greater functionality and scale. Then in 2021, Taproot was introduced into Bitcoin. And at the same time, new form of cryptography, ZK proving, was starting to really become practical, really pick up speed. And myself and a small group of other developers, we recognized back then, 5 years ago, that what this did is it opened the door for us to basically being able to accomplish everything that we thought that we would do with Bitcoin DeFi, with drive chains, with side chains, in a much cleaner and much more powerful way. And so we thought that there was going to be a need to have one last fork, basically, for Bitcoin, which would introduce ZK. And we started working on that project. We published a number of papers. I think to a great extent, our work kicked off the entire sort of Bitcoin roll-up space. But we actually sort of outdid ourselves. By the end of 2023, we had realized that it was possible to achieve practically everything we wanted to achieve without having to make any changes to Bitcoin's fundamental code. And then in April, we published a paper, Bitsnark and Grail, describing how we could verify on Bitcoin ZK proofs. And then in block 853626 last year, for the first time ever on Bitcoin mainnet, we demonstrated this actually happening. And we've been building Bitcoin OS as an operating system that uses this to basically provide Bitcoin with unlimited scale, unlimited programmability, and for Litecoin, I think in particular, unlimited ability to integrate with other systems.
Okay, very good. And this idea was an old Bitcoin idea that seems to have been abandoned for a while, which was kind of led to the creation of Ethereum. Is that a correct statement? Because a lot of the earlier developers were talking about smart contracts and doing other non-monetary things with Bitcoin, and yet it seems that somewhere along the line that changed, and now we're kind of coming back to it with what you're building in a permissionless way.
I think that practically everything we can think of sort of had its genesis in early Bitcoin creativity and development and conversation, right? Sidechains, ZK proofs, NFTs, tokenization. That was all already in the conversation 2012, 2013.
Right.
Vitalik was a young guy, got very impatient, went off and basically used a shortcut to try and get there, which was that you take the entire code the entire virtual machine, all of the data, and you shove all of that into the blockchain. And then what happens is you get every single node and every single validator to rerun every single compute. Now, why do that? The answer is that what a smart contract is basically just verifiable compute. It means it's compute that somebody runs and you can trust because you can know for certain that it was run the way it was supposed to be run, right? That there's no central party that you need to trust. You just trust the compute. And so what Vitalik did by taking all of that and shoving it into the blockchain and then forcing every single node to run it is he created verifiable compute via redundancy, right? You get everyone to rerun it, you get a massively redundant system. Bitcoiners, including myself at the time, did not think that this was a practical way forward because we said it will not scale and it will damage the ability to, you'll constantly find yourselves on the horns of a dilemma where on the one hand, you need to keep bloating and making the chain more and more complicated. And on the other hand, you, in doing that, are reducing the number of people who can actually understand the code base. Well, today, nobody understands the Ethereum code base. Can run a full node, can themselves verify the activity. And so I think that Ethereum has played an extremely important role in demonstrating the utility and value of having verifiable compute. But what it spawned was this entire paradigm of basically every single smart contract chain that we're aware of today does verifiable compute via redundancy. And what was so exciting 5 years ago, and what is so exciting, the realization we had 5 years ago and the sort of implementation that we have now, is for the first time ever, we have verifiable compute via cryptography. So what BitcoinOS does is it takes compute that exists outside of Bitcoin and gives Bitcoin eyes and a brain to be able to understand that compute. And so a single person can run compute on their own machine and then with a ZK proof provide that proof, just a tiny little 300 byte proof to Bitcoin, can be verified, and then you don't need the redundancy at all. Everyone can utilize that compute knowing that it has been proven to have been run on the code that it said it was going to be run, in the way that it was said it was going to be done, with the data that it was said it was going to be done. And so in my mind, the entire smart contract chain paradigm that sort of was spawned by Ethereum was a mistake, right? It was a left turn at the fork. It was a very valuable mistake. Many mistakes are, but it was a mistake nonetheless. And now we finally have the ability to do it properly.
Okay, very good. Good words on that. It's exciting to see these things. And again, and I already kind of said this, this is all permissionless. This did not require a change to core, what you built. Granted, you're using some of the changes of core, I understand that, but this is open and people are able to build. It's kind of, what you've done is now open to all, and pretty neat. I think that's kind of part of the spirit of this space too. So let's talk about maybe LitVM. Is LitVM sort of a concept fork of the Bitcoin OS, or is it something different? Maybe compare and contrast the Litecoin Virtual Machine and the Bitcoin operating system.
Yeah, so LitVM is not a fork or even a similar code base to BOSS. What it is a interesting evolution that we didn't see coming. So as we were building BOSS, one of the use cases that we thought was going to be extremely valuable was the ability to take basically build rollups onto Bitcoin. And to do that, we needed to have a system which would allow you to take a chain, prove the state of the chain and any state changes that occur on the chain as a ZK proof, and then have that proof written to and verified by Bitcoin. Now, it turns out that Litecoin is very, very similar to Bitcoin. And so the tools that we built, making it possible to build ZK rollups to Bitcoin, are also, with small modification, applicable to Litecoin. And so what LitVM represents is one instance of the way in which the work that we're doing is upgrading not just Bitcoin, but also Litecoin by allowing for the first time a rollup, a ZK rollup, right? A fully proven rollup which doesn't have its own, like a new chain, which doesn't have its own consensus mechanism. Its consensus, its security comes from Litecoin. Transactions can move trustlessly between the two environments. So it's effectively just an extension of Litecoin.
And the bridge would be the ZK. Stamping on chain, L1.
Well, yeah. First of all, stamping is not the correct term
Fair enough on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, you do write ZK. So basically, what happens? Remember how I said that the magic of ZK, right, is that it allows you. So why is it called ZK? Zero knowledge, right? Zero knowledge cryptography. That sounds not so great, right? But what it basically allows you to do is to create proofs where you have limited or sometimes even zero knowledge of the inner workings of what is happening on the other side. And the realization that we had and what we're building out is that you can take compute, you can prove that the compute was correct without having to have the base layer aware of that compute. For Bitcoin or for Litecoin to be aware of all of the compute, every single Bitcoin or Litecoin node would have to rerun that compute. But what we're doing is we're basically allowing the same end result as a smart contract, which is done via redundancy, to happen via cryptography. Mm-hmm. And how big can this software be? It can be huge. It can be an entire chain with multiple different applications, can now be bundled together into a proof proven to Litecoin. And in that respect, you can also then pass. Now, this is not a bridge per se, right? So the way we're going to allow Litecoin to move not just from Litecoin to LitVM, but to Bitcoin, to Cardano, to eventually even Ethereum or whatever, is we've extended the idea of how you build tokenization itself, and we're taking every single token and turning those tokens into ZK proofs. And not just ZK proofs, but recursive ZK proofs, right? What does it mean, a recursive ZK proof? A recursive ZK proof is a proof not only of itself, but also of its history. And so the big challenge with bridging up until now is that if you try and move a token, in a way, I think it's actually almost meaningless to say that you're moving a token from one chain to another in the old paradigm. Because a token's only existence is as a series of balance changes that are recorded in the history of a chain.
Right.
So unless you're able to somehow move a proof of those balance changes, you're not actually moving the token at all. You're just sort of locking it up and hoping for the best. One of the most powerful things that we've built is a protocol called Charms. And what Charms does for the first time is create tokens as recursive, right? ZK proofs which prove their own history. And so now we can take BTC, turn BTC into a programmable token with recursive proofs, and allow that BTC to migrate bridgelessly to LitVM, but even more so to migrate to Litecoin main chain itself, and for LTC tokens to do the same thing. And in this respect, this is sort of an ambition which has emerged from the technology. This is not what we initially set out to do, but as we were building and sort of recognizing the capabilities and the powers of what we were building, we recognized that we're effectively building a system which allows Litecoin, Cardano, all of the world's chains to be tightly coupled and effectively merged with Bitcoin into a single unified ecosystem.
And that's the Omnichain. And I was going to ask you about that. So what is the current, I guess, breadth of the Omnichain you're working with or connecting Litecoin with the LitVM project, Bitcoin, of course, Polygon, Ethereum? How big will this chain get?
Well,
This Omnichain.
I think if you ask the LitVM guys how they're thinking about it, they might give you a different answer, but I'll give you my answer. My answer is that any two users with any set of assets should be able to interact with each other regardless of chain. And going a step further, if you're a developer and you're building a system, today the way you would do it is you would go and you'd build like an application for Ethereum. And then if you wanted to be even on a very, very similar chain, like, I don't know, Arbitrum, right? You would have to then redeploy the whole thing. So imagine if you are an app developer, right? And you write a game, right? But now you want that game to be in New York, and you want that game to be in San Francisco, and you want that game to be in London. You had to go and rewrite it and redeploy it every single time. That's not how the internet works at all. That would be insanity. What the internet did was build, deploy once, everyone in the world gets access. But the so-called internet value that we've built over the last 15 years doesn't look even remotely like that. Yeah. And so our goal is to actually make it work that way, right? As a developer, you come, you build, you deploy to Litecoin, you deploy to LitVM, you deploy wherever it is that you're deploying to. But all of the users on all of the systems that are integrated with BOSS and via BOSS with Bitcoin and all of these other chains become your immediate potential users and are able to interact with each other. And so in that respect, for the first time, crypto will actually start feeling like the internet.
Very, very good. This is certainly interesting. I think the entire community is excited about what's coming out with LitVM and, of course, with BitcoinOS, which you've already pioneered with that protocol or operating system on top of Bitcoin. And maybe, and you kind of alluded to this, maybe we should discuss your relationship to LitVM. You're not a part of their immediate team, but you're more like collaborating or, working with them as more of a partner. Is that right? How would you describe that?
So I would say that the LitVM team are an extremely talented team who have an incredible track record of building and launching applications which become very, very popular. They launched Polygon, they launched QuickSwap, they launched Dogechain. These are big names and systems which had hundreds of thousands, millions of users. I think what we're good at is building fundamentally good and very surprising technology. So a lot of what we've built was, until we showed it to the world, and then even sometimes several months after, considered impossible, right? I like to, when we're patting ourselves on the back, I tell, the devs, you guys are amazing. You eat impossible for breakfast. And so I think that, yeah, so I think that that it's that combination, right? We've built some extremely powerful and exciting tools and technologies, and the LitVM team have taken one particular slice of an exciting end result that can provide, and are bringing it to market.
Very good, very good. And I suspect we'll get more of those folks on this podcast for everybody to hear. It hasn't happened yet, but we've kind of had some hints here and there. And of course, we met them at the summit. So it's really exciting to see what you're doing, and of course, learning more about LitVM for the Litecoin space specifically. I do want to look at ZKs because I think that's a real big part of what you've built. And this is more of a community question, actually. Here we have some of those at the end, but I worked this one in. A guy messaged me about it. Shout out to Jared. He's interested in basically having you explain the role of the sequencer and the prover, and how, and maybe you can't answer this, seeing that you're not internal to LitVM, but how would they be distributed to LitVM users or builders?
Yeah, I think I can probably give a pretty decent answer. So maybe let me start by describing what a sequencer is. And I'm going to take a step back. I don't know your audience, so I might be giving a little too much background here, but I'll give some context.
We'll take all
So
of it.
so what is a blockchain? Satoshi initially he didn't call it a blockchain at all. He called it a time chain. In other words, what it's designed to do is really provide one thing, a ledger where you know what the last transaction that is valid is. In other words, it sequences the transactions that occur on a ledger. That's it. So the sequencer is the system which says this transaction happened, then this transaction happened, then this transaction happened. Now, um, the point of proof of work was to randomize who can um, or order the most recent batch of transactions, which we call a block.
Yep.
And that was to make sure that there was no one who could get special advantage via sequencing. And also to make sure, and this is particularly important, that there was no one who could censor transactions by refusing to sequence them. Okay, so having that proof of work is extremely expensive, and Litecoin have already done that work. You guys have a system which has been running for well over a decade now and doing the job of sequencing transactions. What LitVM are doing is they're building an additional system which is going to piggyback off of that work and use that as the ultimate consensus mechanism, the ultimate sequencing mechanism. But in between, every time they write a proof, somebody needs to say, all right, all of the transactions that have happened in between on LitVM, this is the order in which they occurred. Initially, LitVM are going to start with a single sequencer. Now, we have a tendency, which I think is sometimes unfortunate in the crypto space, of talking about the importance of decentralization. But decentralization itself is actually a tool. It's not an end goal, right? The reason we care about decentralization is because of what it does, which is it makes systems unmanipulable, it makes systems uncensorable.
Yep.
Now, if you're already piggybacking off of an existing decentralized sequencing system, you can actually build on top of that centralized sequencing systems, which cannot cheat because they are subservient to and ultimately have to share with the decentralized sequencing system their proposed sequencing. And so while there is a degree of centralization there, it actually doesn't impact the user or the system anywhere near the way that we would usually think it would. That said, there are two reasons why over time you might want to introduce additional sequencers and have some kind of round robin or some other way of having like different people sequence at different times. One is redundancy. What happens if that single sequencer goes offline?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then users have to go and basically write their transactions themselves to Litecoin, and the whole system becomes very, very slow, expensive, and you basically lose the advantages of having a layer 2. The second reason is because you want to potentially avoid a situation where maybe they cannot censor transactions, but they could choose to sort of prioritize certain transactions and sort of do so for money. And then, this is what in Ethereum land they call miner extractable value, right? Or in our case would be sequencer extractable value. So those are relatively minor things in comparison to the censorship resistance which they're getting from Litecoin. All of this is to say, my expectation is that they will start with a single sequencer and then introduce over time the ability to have additional sequencers.
Which could mitigate, and those would be native within LitVM itself. It wouldn't be anyone building a LitVM would be using LitVM's sequencers. You're not having new products build new ones.
You can think of a sequencer as effectively sort of a larger node, which is able to accept huge numbers of transactions and properly order them. So usually these are much bigger machines, but in an environment where you have, look, the way we think about a blockchain is we try to keep the nodes very small. We try to have as many people having access to them as possible.
Right.
Because the base layer, that decentralization is really, really critical. But with layer twos, because they get the advantage of the base layer, they can actually focus on other things, which usually you wouldn't be willing to sacrifice. Because it's not a sacrifice. It's sort of like, technological advancements allow you to sort of have your cake and eat it too. So I would never expect there to be tens of thousands or thousands of sequencers. You probably want to have fewer sequencers because that reduces the communication overhead between the sequencers and allows the system to operate at very, very high scale that would be impossible in a much more flat system.
Very good. I appreciate you kind of elaborating on that. And again, we'll have LitVM discuss further on this topic down the road. I do want to talk about charms. You mentioned that already. How do charms differentiate from, let's say, runes or ordinals or other NFTs that may already be on Litecoin?
Well, the technology is very different, but I'll try and answer the question from a functional perspective.
Sure.
From a functional perspective, I would say BRC20 and runes are early proof of concepts, but they're not really that useful for most use cases. I'll give two examples. Right, we've seen pretty much all runes, all BRC20s, and the Litecoin equivalents basically just being meme coins. Why?
Mostly,
because
yes.
you can issue that token from a centralized issuer, or you can issue the token, but then there's no end to the issuance of the token in a more decentralized way, and then you can't add any functionality to it. So one example of something you wouldn't be able to build in this way is a stablecoin, because the number of stablecoins needs to change based on the collateral that is available for those stablecoins. So sometimes the number of stablecoins needs to increase, sometimes the number of stablecoins need to decrease. This is true for a centralized stablecoin or a decentralized stablecoin. Can't do it with runes, can't do it with BRC20. There's no way to programmably adjust the number of tokens issued. For a decentralized stablecoin, the problem is even worse, because there's no way to monitor the collateral. There's no way to have continuous issuance, and there's no way to do any of those things in a decentralized way. Another example is, let's say you want to have a DAO, right? You want to be able to have people lock up their tokens, stake their tokens, vote with their tokens. These are all functions which simply do not exist and are impossible with BRC20 or runes. And so what Charms allows for the first time is tokens that exist on Bitcoin and exist on other chains to be programmable. So we'll be bringing programmable tokens, right? Even though we built it for Bitcoin, it is so appropriate for Litecoin that we're going to be doing it for Litecoin, right after. Litecoin will have programmable tokens. We'll have the ability to have DAOs, to have staking, and not just new tokens, but you'll be able to take LTC itself, Litecoin itself, and turn it into a programmable token. Then the next interesting thing about charms is that because charms are built as recursive ZK proofs, they're very, very small. These are 300 byte proofs with some additional data. So you're looking at, 4 to 9 kilobytes per transaction. Very, very small. And because it's recursive, you can now hop over with your LTC to Bitcoin or to Cardano or eventually to Sui and Tron. And you'll be able to hop over with stablecoins from those chains into Litecoin. And you'll be able to do it as a single user without depositing those tokens into a bridge, right? The transactions themselves, you'll write the transaction which starts on chain A and ends on chain B. And so that's sort of, the build once, deploy once philosophy. And so sometimes the way we describe this is like if a regular token is a slug, right? It's just sort of crawling around. completely dependent on the environment, not to kill it. The charms, we started building them out to be snails, right? They have a little shell. They carry all of the data. They carry all of the smart contract activity with them. But then we realized that they sort of, like Bitcoin is gold with a teleportation device, these little sort of magical snails have wings and they can move from chain to chain, and they carry with them their history, the smart contracts that they're interacting with. And so that means that you no longer go to a chain to work with a smart contract. Rather, the smart contract follows you, right? You continue to interact with the smart contract wherever you are. And this is a much more human-centric way of thinking about crypto. Your assets, right, are not on Ethereum. Your assets are with you wherever you happen to be.
So pardon me for the question. I'm trying to conceptualize this because, again, we only have runes, ordinals, a few things with OmniLite too. This is similar, but seems to be much more advanced in the way you're presenting this. And let's say I'm not the one building, right? But I'd be a user using the advantages of LitVM in this case. I want to use charms. Would this be in a node environment that I'm going to be doing all these swaps and hops, or how does that look?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by node environment.
Like, how would the user, not being like a builder, I don't want to start a project on LitVM, but maybe I'm down the road. Maybe that's up to the teams that are building a LitVM to release a product for me to use. That's what I'm saying, that there's builder side and there's user side. Maybe it's just whatever the builders build out, I'm going to use. But I'm trying to conceptualize, how would we on the ground be doing these swaps? Or perhaps these things don't exist yet and will to be determined.
We have the first wallets that are integrating with this technology.
Yeah.
But basically, the way you will interact, I suspect, will look initially very similar to the way you're interacting with tokens today. You have your tokens in a wallet, you write a transaction, you put in your transaction address. If there's a smart contract, the address is, tied to some kind of programmability, and you click send.
Okay.
Where I think this is going to go, and I think we're going to start seeing the first examples of this pretty soon, is the experience will actually start to feel a lot more like the internet integrated with property rights. So you'll go to a website and you will, let's say we're on Zoom right now, right? Let's say we wanted to pay for Zoom Premium. So there would be a little button on the top right. I would click, I would deposit my assets into Zoom Premium, and now I have Zoom Premium. And the abstraction of sort of going to your wallet and getting an address from your wallet and all of that, I think, is going to fall into the background. And interacting with, I think what we're going to end up with is something which feels a lot more like your experience today with Amazon, right? You go to Amazon and you purchase something. It doesn't say to you, go to your wallet and send me the transaction. It just, you've already sort of inputted onto your computer. You have on your computer your Google wallet or your Apple wallet or your credit card information or whatever it is, and that is interacting instantaneously. And today, to sort of further illustrate how things are different, today if you were to go use a crypto service, you would go, I don't know, to Uniswap or whatever, and you would say, all right, which chain am I on? Which version of Uniswap do I need to use? Right? That's going to disappear. The only Web 2 sort of services that still do that are things like Spotify, where if you got your Spotify in the US and you move to Argentina for 2 months, 30 days in, your Spotify stops working because, they're not licensed for Argentina. But this whole idea of which chain am I on, where is my wallet, it's going to disappear. And the experience is going to be Web 2. And so ultimately, we've been promising for 15 years now, this thing that we're going to build the internet of value. I think that is a wrong-headed idea. What's actually going to happen is we're going to have the internet as it is today with value, right? And basically, and I think Bitcoin is now getting to the point that it has the heft to act as a powerful enough protocol to basically become accepted as the third pillar of the internet, just another base protocol of the internet. Everyone's going to be integrated with it, and that includes Litecoin through Bitcoin will be integrated with the entire internet.
Very good. Yeah, it's interesting to conceive these things because you would be building these things out more of a visionary versus a standard user on the ground. Yet we have to connect those two in platforms like these because we're used to nodes, we're used to mobile wallets, we're used to the internet and the Spotify as we know it. But I think we've all discussed, this kind of invisible technology that's running in the background. You're using it, and you may not even know it. And so I guess that's what we're looking at. I didn't know if LitVM had a wallet they were planning on rolling out. Maybe they do. But I think we're looking at the builders on top of that larger virtual machine. Whatever product they're launching, they'll have it integrated with whatever they need to integrate it with. So it will be a lot easier to use than maybe to conceptualize and discuss in this setting, because it's kind of like we're pulling things out and trying to make them connect. But it's exciting. And I think we've talked about multi-chaining for a long time. And I would agree that Bitcoin is, it's still king, right? And it's a powerhouse, and it's not going away. And Litecoin, of course, has.
And I think we're very lucky for that, because if we didn't have, if you imagine a different parallel sort of history, right, where 2017 Bitcoin Cash did really well, and now people didn't know what Bitcoin was. Well, what we would have ended up with is a much smaller, much more miserable, much more fragmented crypto ecosystem. We would have, I think, a crypto ecosystem which looks very much like it is now. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry launch their own chain. Nothing reaches the critical mass of becoming, a globally accepted network. And so the whole project, I think, would have been in serious risk of failing. What we're really building with Bitcoin is a standard. Right? With any crypto network, what we're trying to do is build a standard. That's why we call it consensus. It's not the technology that matters, it's the consensus. And so we really need, I think we all live basically under the nuclear umbrella. All of crypto lives under the nuclear umbrella of Bitcoin. The regulators haven't attacked Ethereum because Bitcoin is there saying, well, what's the point? You've got Bitcoin. It's so decentralized. It's so invulnerable. So maybe you take out Ethereum, but what will you have accomplished? There's a million other systems, and the primary one is just going to be there anyway. And then because of that, we now are starting to see states, corporations, large financial institutions, effectively the entire world, adopt Bitcoin. And because of that, by extension, adopt Litecoin, adopt the rest of crypto.
Yeah, this is true. And I think there's something. So I think Ethereum was blessed, but either way, it's a very popular chain. A lot of people use it, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. And then the more the commodity, like Bitcoin being the primary commodity, gold, digital gold, that's absolutely been accepted now. So now we're looking at Litecoin being also a digital commodity. Bitcoin Cash, yes, because they share a Genesis block, but yes, I agree that's much more of a divisive project. But we're all here. There's interest, and I think the cat's out of the bag. So it's exciting. It's exciting to watch this. We'll do a few more questions, and then we'll hop into the Q&A. I want to be concerned with our time here, and also these may be more appropriate for LitVM themselves. I wanted to talk about the DAO, the tokenomics. Are you able to comment on that at all?
Of LitVM?
Of LitVM.
No, I don't think I'm particularly qualified to talk about the tokenomics of LitVM.
Fair enough on that. In terms of stable coins, this might be another one for LitVM, because I think that's really exciting. So we do have Omni layer for Litecoin called Omni Lite. I think at one point we were looking to possibly get stables launched on that. It's available. The client's active. You can still download it, but it hasn't been updated since 2022. There's really not a lot of emphasis there anymore. And I want to say that Bitcoin was a USDT started on Bitcoin's version of the Omni layer. Was that correct? Once upon a time.
That's right, yeah.
So we had that, but things never came of it. So I'm curious of what stablecoin launching looks like with LitVM or even BitcoinOS.
I think in early on, what you're just going to see is you're going to see Tether and USDC on Litecoin. And the reason is because, there's a bunch of different projects, chains now integrating into Bitcoin via BOS. I'm very, very excited by the degree of adoption that we're seeing. And every time one of those things happens, they eventually they become part of the family, right? Sort of like, the cliche wedding speech. Don't think of it as losing a daughter, think of it as gaining a son. Um, um, so if there are stable, so let's say we integrate with Sway, right? Sway integrates into Bitcoin via Boss. It's already got USDT and USDC on it. That instantly becomes available in Litecoin. And that's the power here. But where I think it goes from there is as stable Bitcoins become a more important part of global commerce, the same excitement that I don't know how long have you been in Bitcoin and Litecoin?
Early as an onlooker, a spectator, back in the Ron Paul era,
Well, there you go.
and then
Yeah.
more seriously around 2016.
So if it was back in the Ron Paul era,
Yeah, it was early days.
probably one of the things that excited you, right, as me, as I think so many of us, was okay, here is something I can truly own.
Absolutely.
It's
Property rights.
not, yeah, I don't need to trust some corporate entity. I don't need to trust a government. I think that 5 years from now, or even less, we're going to have an entire generation of Gen Zers who are transacting in stablecoins. And they're going to ask themselves, well, do I really want to use Citicoin by Citibank? Do I really want to use Tether by, or do I want to, are they going to be excited in the same way that you were excited about Bitcoin and Litecoin? Are they going to be excited by the fact that they can have assets where they're fully in control? No one can ever take it from them. No one can stop their transactions. No one can tell them they can't buy porn or weed or whatever. And so I think as stablecoins become more important, the demand for decentralized stablecoins is going to become vastly more important. And so how do you do that? Well, you could have stablecoins backed by Litecoin, right? Um, you know, why is the British pound called the pound? Because it used to be redeemable for a pound of silver.
Yeah.
Well, if Litecoin is silver, then you're going to have, the Litecoin pound.
Very good. Very good. And dollars came from Germany once upon a time, but this is
Well,
interesting
the word
commentary.
dollar,
Dollar,
comes
THALAR.
dollar, exactly.
Yes.
Right? Dollar was a gold mine.
Yes. And this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but that's what I see these commodities being. I mean, we had a gold standard for a period of time, but we still also had silver operating functionally within it. Now I understand we didn't have the digitization to the eighth decimal point and things like this, but there were still multi-currencies circulating in tandem, even though one was king. And they had different advantages. The kingdoms are using gold, the people are using, silver, or maybe fractional, even beyond that, nickels and copper, things like that. So I do think there's a space for commodities and commodity money,
And I think
even in
very
this digital
important.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we always have these alternate networks. And the reason is genetic diversity.
Yeah.
If think of the Cavendish banana, right? Cavendish banana, every single banana you've ever eaten in your life is an exact genetic clone of every other banana you've ever eaten because they all come from one plant that has been cloned. And so you get a fungus wiping out potentially the entire, banana industry globally. But, several times now we've seen bananas wiped out in Colombia, wiped out in Bolivia, because there's no genetic diversity. I don't believe that we should just have Bitcoin. I think it's important that we have variance because there's cross-pollination, because there's competition, and because there's genetic diversity.
This is good. We need more. So this is where I think I struggle. There's some maximalists who will say nothing other than Bitcoin only. But I think historically, Bitcoiners and Litecoiners have worked together very well. And I think those people never left. They've just been eclipsed. And I think you're one of these wonderful examples. And what do you see? I think the tide's turning on that.
I do think the tide's turning, and I think the tide is turning now because Bitcoin has won. So because Bitcoin is one, the need for genetic diversity is all the more obvious. And because Bitcoin is one, we can be magnanimous in victory. I think early on, I didn't like Litecoin and Ethereum and XRP. I mean, I still don't like XRP, but but I didn't like all of these systems.
You're in company with that.
Because I felt that they were coming too soon, that they were introducing a degree of divisiveness, tribalism, confusion, and corroding the primary thing that we were trying to build, which was a global consensus, which was as an alternative to the government statist consensus.
Correct.
But now I think that Bitcoin's lead is so insurmountable, and it is such a credible alternative to the statist. And in fact, it's starting to be adopted by, basically what we're going through now is that the states were sanctioning, the US sanctioned Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Bitcoin. and now it's negotiating with Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is becoming a sovereign in its own right, effectively. And so now where my attention is and where my concerns are have changed. They're basically this, a person should respond to changing circumstances. The circumstance now is that I don't want Bitcoin to become too powerful. I don't want it to wipe out the genetic diversity.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I think something with absolute arrogance, we have the statement, pride comes before destruction. And I think sometimes there's an immunity with the success, which I think is hard. And Bitcoiners are saying this, and they're not exactly accepted all the time. But, that the arrogance could actually have them go backwards. So, yeah, it's interesting. I appreciate your opinion on it. We'll go to the community questions. I don't have very many. I did remove one of them just based on our conversation before and just that you're not officially with the LitVM team, so that's probably more appropriate for them. But Crypto Spartan says, what are you most excited about being built on the Litecoin Virtual Machine, or what possibilities?
I think, we're working with LitVM now to create opportunities for people to start earning yield on Litecoin, turn Litecoin into a yield-bearing asset. And I think for me, the two most important things would be, on the one hand, letting Litecoin become a productive asset, either being used as collateral, maybe being used to issue stablecoins, and being able to allow people to earn yield, because that gives you a savings avenue and a financial freedom avenue that doesn't exist today. The second thing is, I'm very interested to see how we can use the privacy systems that have already been built into Litecoin. Like as a Bitcoiner, one of the things that I really don't have is a way to transact with my property without it being tied to all of the other transactions in my life. It's incredibly hard for me to cheat on my wife. And so if Litecoin can help with that, that would be, that would be something.
Well, I'd be curious, and this would be a question for David Burkett, but MWeb, if there's any integrations with that at some point with what you're building.
Yeah. So I because MWeb works on the because the way that MWeb has been implemented to utilize the base UTXO system of Litecoin, charms, and by extension, programmable BTC will become transactable in shielded MWeb type transactions. And so Litecoin could end up playing a very important role as a privacy layer for Bitcoin.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I will follow up with David after the fact about that. I know you mentioned Lightning channels on top of MWeb too. Nothing's ever came of it, but a lot of things are possible that may not exist now. Next question is from Warren Lee, and he's got a few of them here. Are there any side developments with other teams or regarding token launches, or is it just self-team with token launchers?
Yes. I mean, well, I don't know specifically within the Litecoin ecosystem. I think really LitVM are the pioneer. look, I'm going to be immodest for a second. I think that if we're successful, we are rewriting on a very fundamental level the way that crypto works. And, Boss might end up being a legacy that I get to leave for the world, which is far beyond anything I'd ever had ambitions of leaving. And so there's a lot of different projects that are building different things, roll-ups, smart contracts, tokens on the Boss platform. But what LitVM have done is they are absolutely the pioneers of bringing this technology, which I hope will be as revolutionary as I think it can be, to Litecoin. And I think I think that if you are in the Litecoin ecosystem and you're interested in sort of building on this, I think there are basically two avenues, and they're not separate, they're combined. One is, what can we do with charms, right? Programmable Bitcoin, programmable Litecoin tokens, and new programmable tokens on Litecoin. And what new smart contracts, applications, DeFi applications, DAOs would be valuable and important in the Litecoin ecosystem, or Litecoin can do, and how do I build them on LitVM? I think the design space that is going to be opening up over the next few months for Litecoin, it's going to be revolutionary.
I agree with you. These are exciting times. Let's see, with smart contracts on LitVM, will the meme tokens available on ETH, BNB, or Base cross-chain, or will they be cross-chain to Litecoin? And is this also possible with other NFTs?
Ultimately, is maybe not so far in the future. The answer is yes. Basically, the entire world of assets, to a first approximation, will become available on Litecoin and LitVM.
Very good. Well, that's it. We didn't have a ton of questions fielded. I appreciate your time. We're running right about an hour. So why don't we land the plane with maybe some final words that we didn't discuss that you think need to be brought up? Kind of how do we want to close it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you. This was a great chat, and I think you helped me cover a lot of ground. If people find this interesting, intriguing, I'll say this is the entry point to a rabbit hole. I think we're all new to Bitcoin again. I think we're all new to Litecoin again, and we are going to rediscover, what we're able to do with these tools. And so if this is interesting to you, I would encourage you to go down that rabbit hole. I think you can go to the BitcoinOS.build website. You can go to the LitVM website. You can check out Boss Twitter. So that's BTC _OS. And dive into the community. So we've got a rapidly growing and super enthusiastic community, both in Telegram and particularly on Discord. Join us there. And if, you're also happen to be a developer, well, I think this is the place to build.
Here. Very good. Very good. Well, we appreciated having you on. It's been really exciting to discover what you're doing, what you've been doing, and what you're starting to do with the Litecoin Virtual Machine. So anyway, appreciate all of our listeners today on this episode, number 41 with Yago. Find this episode and all episodes on 84million.com/podcast. Of course, find us on X, find us on YouTube, subscribe wherever you find us. So Yago, have a good one. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Be well.